Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. And one of the things that's always bothered me about the Alec Baldwin case is exactly what happened and how it happened, and just the overall sheer tragedy of the whole situation. And then you compound that by the fact that Alec Baldwin gave an interview, and we did a reaction to his interview. And we're going to play a little bit of that today, but here's what today's episode's about. Today's episode is we're going to do a little reenactment. We're going to a gun range, Bill's gun range, and we are going to test an exact replica of a 1873 Colt Peacemaker. So we're going to try that out and see exactly what Alec Baldwin talks about here in the video. But before we go and do that, let's just kind of revisit what Mr. Baldwin was saying in his interview with George Stephanopoulos.
The gun wasn't meant to be fired in that angle.
So if you're shooting directly into the camera lens, you're not aiming?
I'm not shooting into the camera lens. I'm shooting just off.
Just off?
Right, in her direction.
In her direction.
I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it, which ended up being aimed right.
Now, Alec Baldwin's being sued now by the family of Helena Hutchins. Now, let's just go by what a civil suit is. A civil suit is where somebody brings an action, and usually for money damages, because that's usually the only thing that you can get are money damages. So they're suing for money for wrongful death, basically. And anybody in the chain, so the company that was Rost, that was producing the movie, Alec Baldwin himself, probably the assistant director or whoever handed him the gun just before this, the armorer, and anybody else in the chain of the action, okay? And in a civil action, you only need to prove by a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to a criminal case. A criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's the highest burden of proof in our justice system. Now, what the preponderance of evidence means is just slightly more true than not true, okay? And so he's going through this, and every word he says during this interview is going to be analyzed and used by the civil attorneys, and they'll depose him. You don't have the right in a civil case to take the Fifth Amendment. Take that back. You do have the right to take the Fifth Amendment, but if you do, that silence can be held against you in a civil context. And what it means is that an adverse inference can be drawn from your silence. In other words, if he wouldn't take the Fifth anyway because he's just not that smart, but if he was to take the Fifth Amendment, first of all, they could get these statements in because they're a statement of a party opponent. So a statement, and they're not hearsay. So, but if he were to take the Fifth Amendment, the jury would get an instruction in a civil case that they may draw an adverse inference where you cannot have that same inference drawn in a criminal case. So let's see what else he has to say.
Below her armpit was what I was told. I don't know. This was a completely incidental shot, an angle that may not have ended up in the film at all. But we kept doing this, and so then I said to her, now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Okay. Can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And then I let go of the hammer and, let's go to the gun range. And let's actually see what happens at the gun range. Okay, so we're here at Bill's gun range, and so what we're doing today is we're taking this gun. This is a replica of an 1873 Peacemaker, and you can see how this works. This is a replica. It's not a real. It's not the original, but it's exact replica, 100%. So you can see it's not loaded right now. And the way you load it is you open this up. You have to go one cock like that. And now you can load it. Okay, you see that? So what we're going to do is we're going to load this up and we're going to fire it. And we're going to take kind of an approach to this firearm similar to, and you analyze what Alec Baldwin says in his video. So this is a replica of a 1973 Colt Peacemaker. So let's load her up. So you got a little door right here, and you see that you have to cock it one click in order to load it. So then you load it like this. So whoever the armorer was had to load it similar to this. You have to load it each bullet individually. It's not like a speed loader. So now Alec Baldwin claimed that he pulled the trigger back and it just went. Well, you can see by pulling the trigger back, there's a click. And you cannot fire this gun. I'm pulling on the trigger right now and you cannot fire it. The first click is a safety. You pull it all the way back, then it fires. One click, it doesn't fire. You pull it all the way back. So then, once you fire the weapon, the only way to make this spin is if you got to put the safety back on. So then, to unload it, you push it out like that. Spin it, push it, spin it, push it, spin it. So these are you have to be pretty deliberate to load and unload this firearm. So when Alec Baldwin says he pulled the trigger back and then it just went off, not believable. You can see from what we demonstrated at the gun range that if you cock it just a little bit, that first click is the safety of the gun. So you can't fire it. And I showed you at the gun range. I tried to fire it when I had, and that's just that first little click. So if you let it go, it's on safety. It's impossible. And that's an exact replica of that firearm. So it operates the same way. You pull it all the way back, which is, I think, what he did. I think he pulled it all the way back, and he pulled the trigger. That's the only way that hammer comes back. So now here's why this is important. When you look at what he did in giving this interview, is he's giving the other side a reason to not believe him. Because the other thing he says in the interview is that this is not me, I didn't have anything to do with this. He says, I have no responsibility. Oh, am I at fault? No, I'm not at fault. Now, the other thing is that the attorneys for Rust, that's the producers of the movie, have done a 3D demonstration. It's about a 1-minute video. So we'll watch this and we'll react to it a little bit, and we'll talk a little more on the other side. So that's not the armorer that hands him the weapon, which is that's one of the assistant directors or one of the other prop guys. And what we don't have in this video is the actual words or the direction that Helena was giving to Alec Baldwin. What we also don't have in that video is the thing that Alec Baldwin talked about. And what Alec Baldwin talked about was, the constant, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? So, so it's not entirely accurate in terms of timing. And so here you have the two different types of rounds, a dummy round and a live round. And you can see that the dummy round has a drilled hole and it has the primer taken out or removed. But this is an exact replica. We shot an exact replica. Goes through her, goes through her back, so basically right through her chest, and then into the assistant producer or the assistant director. So I think that was helpful in terms of seeing the overall mechanics of what happened. But it doesn't really square with what Alec Baldwin said. The other part of this civil case that you're going to see, she's telling me what to do. They gave me the gun. I thought it was unloaded. And she's setting this all up. She's telling me what to do. I'm taking her direction. In other words, they're going to say that she set it up and it's her fault that this happened. You watch. This is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I can already see it happening. And there's a doctrine in civil law called comparative fault. So if her fault is more than that of anybody else's, they don't get any money. But if she bears any fault in there at all, then it's her recovery would be reduced by that amount of fault. So if it's 20% of fault, reduce her recovery by 20%, basically. And it is interesting too, because what we demonstrated at the gun range were two things. One, how kind of arduous it is to load this weapon. You have to load each bullet very carefully. And you saw we opened the door. You have to put the gun on safety before you do that, which is probably how he got the gun on safety, is my guess. And then you open the door, and then you turn the cylinder so one of the chambers is open. It lines up, and you put each bullet in there very deliberately. You have to handle each bullet. It's not like you have a like this gun, See how that opens like that? It's not the same. And you can just kind of by happenstance just put bullets in a gun like this. You can't do that with that Peacemaker. It's very deliberate, and you have to be a little more careful because it's a very narrow opening, and so whoever put those bullets in there did so with care, and that's why it almost seems that it could have been a setup. I don't have anything to suggest that it was, but the amount of care that you needed to dexterity and fine motor skills to do that, you have to be deliberate and you have to pay attention to what you're doing. I just don't know how a live round would have gotten in there. It's just, and there's also a thing called strict liability, and this is almost to that standard because when you have they have a duty of care to everybody around them, and you hold a weapon, you have a duty of care to the other, who's ever on the other side of that weapon, and to all those around you. The fact that it happened alone, there's another doctrine called res ipsa loquitur. The fact speaks for itself. The fact that it happened at all is going to create liability on the part of Alec Baldwin because he's the overall producer, on the part of Alec Baldwin individually because he's the one holding the firearm. And, I don't know what their insurance coverage was, but this is going to likely be settled by insurance, and we'll never see the inside of a courtroom. I really doubt that Alec Baldwin will ever be deposed on this case, because they'll settle it fairly quickly, I would hope. But to do an interview like this, and to do, this is a lot like the case I talked to you a while back about, where the police cadet doesn't think his firearm is loaded, and the photography student wants to picture everyone with his dog. Okay, now point the gun right at the camera, and the gun goes off. Almost identical to that. And that was a manslaughter case in northern Minnesota. So this is just kind of our revisiting the Alec Baldwin situation. I thought it was interesting going to the range. We fired that weapon quite a bit, and it's a solid piece. It's not like you could just drop it and it all of a sudden goes off. There's only one way that went off, and it went off because his finger was on the trigger. No question in my mind. So, and if you're lying about one thing, you could be lying about everything, and you don't get the benefit of the doubt once the jury thinks that you haven't been truthful with them, because you can ruin a whole relationship with just one lie, can't you? And what happens when you get in front of a jury and a jury hears one lie from somebody? You can instruct them not to believe anything that they say. But like I said, this is not going to even see the inside of a courtroom. So this is just our reaction to Alec Baldwin. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Sign up for Patreon, like and follow, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and any other social media that you see us out there. So we'll see you next time on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.